All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod, and we are kicking off another fitness/training/nutrition episode. That's what we do here on Tuesdays. And by we, I mean me on the Help Me Understand podcast. So today, before getting into sharing my perspective on the difference between an opinion, getting advice, and getting counsel or seeking counsel, and how I can relate that to something in the fitness and nutrition and training space, I first, as always, don't want to delay on saying thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. You certainly have no shortage of podcast content that you can consume these days. So I truly appreciate you pressing play on Help Me Understand. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Let me provide you with a couple of angles or layers of context for this particular topic. So one particular angle that this comes to me from is as a coach in the fitness space overall, handling things not just training related, also nutrition. We're also working on sleep. We're working on mindset. There are a whole lot of different things that go into helping someone develop the level of fitness that they want to achieve. So in doing this particular work, what I have I'm going to say what I've found. What I have come to believe is that as the industry continues to grow, and as it continues to grow both on and off of social media and just in the overall culture that we have, specifically here in the United States, because that's where I live. So I can't necessarily speak with any sort of authority on what's happening outside of the US. So I will say within the United States, it does seem to me, and this is a belief that I've formed, that with the growth of coaches, influencers, and everything in between on social media, then also more access than I believe we've ever had before to additional information, and especially then bringing in AI, artificial intelligence, and the growth of tools like ChatGPT and other types of AI, I believe that where coaches like myself can be the most useful is not just with writing the quote unquote perfect training plan or the quote unquote perfect macro split, because neither one of those things really exist. And also I eat, sleep, and breathe training, so I'm still going to keep trying. But beyond just doing that, I believe that where myself and other really coaches that are tied into the development of their clients as whole people, not just somebody who gets meets their weight goal or gets lean or builds muscle or some combination of those things, and then then we're done. When you really care about the development of the individual and how you go about getting the results that you get, I believe that where we are going to be more and more helpful is in helping people navigate through all of the different information, all of the different messaging that is out there, specifically in the fitness space. If you spend any time on social media, I am fairly certain that if fitness is somewhere within your algorithm, you probably cannot go 10 thumb scrolls without getting some opposing points of view and something, at least one, I would venture, somebody should try this experiment. Like scroll through your feed for 10 thumb scrolls. So swipe your thumb 10 times. And I'm going to bet, and I'm not a betting person, however, when I have no money on the line, I can bet. So I'm going to bet that you will get at least 2 pieces of content that will be in direct opposition to what you're currently doing right now. 2 pieces of content that will have you question the style of your eating, basically the nutrition strategy that you have. So if you are somebody who tends to be, let's say, more of an intermittent fasting type individual, you will likely find somebody that tells you that that's wrong. If you are somebody who tends to be more plant-based, so you make plants the base of your eating, and then you branch out from there, you'll probably have somebody who tells you that that's too restrictive. And then you'll probably have, if you're somebody who is more along the lines of flexible dieting, different choices are completely fine. You're going to have somebody who tells you that that's the reason why all the kids in the world are fat right now. Like they're just random things, right? So just curious, if anybody tries that, let me know how many how many opposing points of view you get within 10 squirrels. All right, so back to our point. I believe that with this being something that I can be more helpful with as the years go by and as the industry, I don't think the fitness industry is going to slow down anymore. Something that I have found to be helpful has been to get an understanding of, not only for myself, really more for people that I'm talking to, when they are asking for my thoughts. And this is something that can come up pretty often. Like, hey, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Something that has been helpful for me has been either to internally reword things or just straight out ask the individual, is this something where you're looking for an opinion? Is this something where you'd like some advice, or would you like me to counsel you on this? And so that's what I want to spend a few minutes talking about in this particular episode. So even if you have tuned in and you're thinking, I wasn't really looking for anything training related today, stick around for this one, because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off by just talking to you about my perspective. These are not hard and fast definitions. This is coming from my perspective on how to really kind of columnize things so that there's more clarity in the conversation and understanding what the information is that's coming to you by being able to better define the source of that particular information, the person that you're talking to. So I'm going to start in more of a general sense and define, again, my perspective on the definition of opinion, the definition of advice, and the definition of counsel. And then to end the episode, I'll give you a quick example of a question that I get and how I would answer it if I was just giving advice, how I would answer it if I was just giving an opinion, or how I would answer it if I was talking to someone who is seeking counsel. So if you're not specifically interested in the training thing, then I'll give you the heads up on, okay, I'm done with more of the general stuff, and now you can log off, or whatever it may be. You can log off, leave your 5-star review because you felt like this was fantastic, and you don't have to stick around for how I would answer a training specific question. Okay, so first, as I was jotting down some notes for this particular episode, I thought about 3 pretty consistent things that people will ask me my thoughts on. And for those of you who are not aware, not only am I a coach in the fitness space and have been for the better part of over a decade at this point, and previous to that, I considered myself to be somebody who was fairly well learned, I will say, learned, but just read a lot, really interested in overall fitness and not as much nutrition, but really more fitness. And then when I decided to get my personal training certification, that was about 10 years ago, and then got, professional with it. And that's when I integrated nutrition about 2 years after getting my personal training certification. Then I got my nutrition certification 2 years after that. So along the way, pretty routinely, there would be these 3 general questions that typically would come up. So the first question would be, hey, what's the best way for me to build muscle and get stronger? Another question that I would get pretty often is, how can I lose body fat? And then another question that I would get pretty often is, hey, what do you like? I want to get in shape. What do you think I should be doing? Should I be lifting heavier, or should I be doing more cardio? And a lot of these things are followed up with, I heard, or somebody told me, like that sort of a thing. So these are questions that I do get still pretty regularly, or they'll just be framed as, hey, what are your thoughts on the best way to lose belly fat? What are your thoughts on doing a whole bunch of cardio? So this is like the thing, like, what are your thoughts on? And while these are all solid questions, what I've found is that over time, most people don't necessarily just need like a really quick answer. If they're looking for a quick answer, again, referring to my thumb scroll experiment at the beginning of this episode, you can pretty much get those just about anywhere on social media. What I have found more often than not, and what I've formed my belief is that they need to get, or you who is listening, if this feels relatable, you need to get more clear on the kind of answer that you're actually looking for. And I used to spend, and I still spend a decent amount of time really trying to help people get better at asking the questions. And there are some times where I'll spend more time with, hey, here's a better way to ask the question. And now I'm starting to integrate more of let's get clear on the type of answer that you're looking for. And again, that's where the opinion, the advice, and the counsel. So there we go. That's the kickoff for this episode. So if you don't necessarily know the difference, and again, this is going to be my perspective, then you might walk away from asking a question of someone and you're going to walk away with something that sounds like it helpful, but it's still going to leave you basically stuck and essentially spinning your wheels. And at some point, you're just going to be overwhelmed because you think that you're asking a very specific question, but the answer that you're going to get, if you don't know the difference between are you getting someone's opinion, are you getting someone's advice, or are you getting actual counsel from the individual, then that answer is likely going to leave you in the same exact spot. It's essentially going to be like a boomerang, or you're just going to take a series of lefts and end up right back where you started, like a broken GPS. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this, and I'll run through this here to give you just, again, my thoughts. I think I've put enough disclaimers here that these aren't like actual definitions. These are things that I jot down based on my own experience, inspired by a few things that I read here and there. This whole idea of advice versus counsel is not something that I came up with. I want to say most recently, I heard it referred to in some readings from Napoleon Hill. If you're not familiar with Napoleon Hill, he wrote a pretty well-known book called Think and Grow Rich. Although I have not read that particular book, I did just finish the audiobook called an audiobook called Outwitting the Devil, about personal development. And that one was absolutely fantastic. If you're interested in my take on that particular one, shoot me a message on Instagram. I'm more than happy to kind of share whether I think it would or would not be a great book for you specifically. I'll just have a couple of questions on what you're kind of seeking. So that's kind of my vibe here. And you'll be able to identify, am I giving you my opinion? Am I giving you advice, or am I giving you counsel? If you reach out to me and ask you about the book, Outwitting the Devil. So first, when it comes to an opinion, I believe that an opinion is typically going to be something that's pretty quick. It is going to be something that's shared in a very, very casual manner. Picture scenarios where you're out at, for example, this past weekend, we were traveling for one of my son's baseball tournaments. So parents are just kind of hanging out in the stands, bleachers, you're there, just having some chit chat, that sort of a thing. Those are those types of scenarios when you are just kind of chilling and waiting for something. I don't know. Those are the most often scenarios where it's just kind of casual, that I'm just like sitting around. That might be the thing. But there, again, opinions typically quick, typically fairly casual. They often can also be unsolicited too. So someone can notice that you are drinking something and they offer you an unsolicited opinion about what you're drinking. So notice that you're drinking Sprite Zero. So yeah, zero sugar drinks. I heard those weren't good for you. Like, that's an opinion. Okay. So also, when it comes down to it, I believe that an opinion is really going to be based on someone's preference and not specifically your personal context. So I think this can be one of the main things to help kind of separate, or not kind of, to help separate the difference between an opinion, advice, and counsel. Is when you get an opinion, it's often going to be based on that individual's preference and rarely takes into account what your actual context is as the person who's asking the question. Typically, I find that it usually also will lack a lot of nuance. So there's not really a whole lot of context that's there. And also, rarely does the individual who's giving you the opinion, and I would say rarely is being kind. I would say almost never, when someone's giving you an opinion, are they going to ask any sort of a follow-up question, either before they give their opinion or after they give their opinion. I think that more often than not, the stuff that you're going to see on social media, you're going to hear in like locker room convos at the gym, and a lot of times in social media, like the comment sections. Yes, basically full of different opinions. So for example, if someone were to ask a question like, hey, how do I get muscle and get stronger? Then a quick opinion is, dude, all you really need to do is just lift heavy and eat more. Like, that's all that you need. So that's what I would think about when it comes to defining what an opinion is. So it's everywhere, but they are rarely specific enough to help you really move forward in what you're looking to do. Okay, so that's an opinion. Then when I think about advice, so how to really identify and define from my point of view what advice is. I think that advice, you're talking to someone and you're getting an answer that typically is very well-meaning, but it might not, I don't know, it just might not always be aligned with exactly like the goal that you have, like the overall goal that you have, the vision that you have. So the person is very well-meaning. It might typically come from personal experience, and it may be, I've found, like a mix of personal experience, whether that's purely anecdotal experience or also personal experience or experience that they've had with someone else in the same situation. So, for example, somebody that I was talking to recently asked me a question. I don't want to get too specific, but they asked me a particular question and it had to do with parenting. And while I had not gone through the same situation that they had gone through, I am close to a couple of other people who have gone through a very, very similar scenario. So I framed my answer with, be straight up with you, I myself have not experienced that. Now, I have a couple of clients who have experienced what sounds like almost the very same sort of scenario that you're currently working through with your child. And here's what they were able to offer as far as like their take on what was helpful for them. And then for me, as somebody who was their coach, and then we eventually became friends, like here's what I saw from my perspective. So that was advice. So I also am somebody, because I am a coach, I do believe that pretty much the majority of things that come out of my mouth come with a certain level of responsibility. But we'll talk about that in just a second when it comes to counsel. So advice, again, it's well-meaning, may not necessarily always be aligned though with your overall vision or even your specific situation. A lot of times advice can sound like super confident, but many times it still is going to have this assumption that your context in which you're asking that particular question also matches like their context, the person that you're asking the question of. So it can be super helpful if the situation that you're referring to is very similar to a situation that they've experienced. Think back to what I just talked about a moment ago, where, well, I haven't necessarily been through the same thing. However, I have been very close to a couple people who've experienced that same thing. So there's some similarities that are there. But at the end of the day, still advice can often really miss like the bigger picture of things. So I would really frame advice as something it's a step up from an opinion that someone may have. And typically it is something that you've sought out. Okay, so it's better than the unsolicited opinion. So an advice is typically a step up from an opinion, but at the end of the day, it still is heavily skewed because it is really relying at least 50-50 on that individual's experience and their story, not specifically yours. So it's more of a mixture of that person's individual experience and then some percentage of what you're actually going through. So that's what I want to share about advice. Now, the last one, which is where I believe that coaching really comes into play, and I could really branch this out to pretty much any field that either has or you're working with an individual who has a sense of responsibility for what happens after the information has been given. And there also is typically, it's a two-way conversation. It's not a Q&A, it's a conversation. That's probably one of the main things that I can say about counsel, and that really, really differentiates between, that's the main thing I could say about counsel that differentiates it from getting advice or getting an opinion, is that counsel, many times in my perspective, is something that is an ongoing, it's a two-way conversation. I wouldn't necessarily say ongoing, but it's a two-way conversation. There is information gathering. There's like a back and forth prior to giving a recommendation, a suggestion, that sort of a thing. So to me, counsel, like that's where the growth actually happens and when like the real work actually starts to begin. So back to something I was talking about at the very beginning, where I have spent most of my time as I'm working through things, in this particular realm, trying to help people get better at asking the right questions. And while that's helpful, there also are particular times or situations that dictate you've already asked, like the cat's out of the bag. You've already asked the particular question, and now you're coming to me with, hey, I got this particular answer. What do you think about this answer? And so I'm working on trying to help an individual develop a sense of, okay, how do I filter this particular answer? Was that answer given to me as a piece of advice? Was it given to me as an opinion? Or was it given to me based on seeking counsel? So some things that can also help you identify that you are being given good counsel is that the information that you're given is built around your actual goals, your schedule, your history, and then, your lifestyle too. And that's why I refer to myself as a lifestyle centric coach, because it's about, let's get an understanding for your lifestyle, and then we will work on building plans around that. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing that from my point of view is going to be the most sustainable. Oftentimes, counsel can be tough for people to really digest, because it's not about just giving you okay, here's the answer and go do that. It's many times when someone is offering counsel, we don't necessarily know exactly what the answer is. We're just trying to help you figure out what the next right step is going to be. So we may have seen this movie before. It's a phrase that I use all the time. Like sometimes I'll start working with somebody within the first couple of weeks, like I've seen this movie before. And also what's not going to be helpful is me to do a spoiler alert and be like, I've seen how this movie ends, so I want to have you change this whole thing. Like, let's turn the car all the way around. That typically doesn't get received well and doesn't keep the person engaged. So something that we work on is, well, let me give you my feedback. Let me listen to your feedback. And what do we think the next right step would be? Like the next step. So let's look one step in front of us versus 15 steps down the road, and you try to slowly veer that a different direction. I do, again, really think that counsel comes with an immense sense of professional responsibility. So this is where you have like coaches and mentors and trusted guides as you are along in your journey, whether it's your work journey, your career journey, whether it's your personal development journey, just you as an individual, whether it is your fitness journey, whatever it may be, people along the way that are helping to guide you as you navigate through things. And it's such a partnership. It's not something that's just prescribed, like go do this. It is about being able to, again, have that back and forth. Like that's one of the main things that I would say will really stick out for you. So when it comes to getting counsel, it may not always be the loudest or boldest. It's typically going to be the most thoughtful, though, because it's something that's really built on care and a sense of responsibility. There's clarity. So there's time taken to, okay, this is the direction that we're going to go. What sort of questions do you have? Or do you repeat back to me or help me understand that you're confident in why we're going this particular direction? I can't tell you how many times that I've worked with somebody or had a conversation with someone who will say, well, my old coach told me to do this, or I was in a program that told me to do this. And internally, I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. However, I've learned to really reframe, and I'll ask, okay, well, help me understand where that direction was coming from. And I cannot tell you how many times the person has responded, I'm not really sure. I'll say, well, did you feel like that was something that you could ask, or was it an environment where you weren't necessarily able to ask? And they're like, I just never thought about it. I just figured they're a professional. They know what they're doing. So I just did what they asked me to do. And that's another reason why I think that really spending the majority of the time in counsel when it comes to somebody that you're working with to try and get to a particular result, that is a two-way, it's a collaboration. So that's really the biggest piece there. All right. So to finish things out, I'm actually going to apply it to a fitness question. So I'm going to take a fitness question. So if you're not here for the fitness, you can log off. You can stop listening to the episode, but make sure that you leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening to this, because thank you. I appreciate it. If you are going to stick around, this will be a quickie. So I'm going to take this question, and the question is, how can I lose body fat? Because that's a common one. So I'm going to take that question. I'm going to answer it from the standpoint of giving advice. I'm then going to answer it from the standpoint of offering an opinion. And then I'm going to answer it, or actually I'm going to go opinion first. Then I'm going to go advice. And then I'm going to give some counsel on that. So somebody comes to me and they say, hey, how can I lose body fat? So from an opinion standpoint, and if you know me reasonably well, you know that I'm basically kind of like playing a role here, because I don't spend I would like to think that I don't spend a lot of time in the opinion category. I don't spend a lot of mental energy on that. I hang out the majority of the time between advice and counsel. And typically with advice, I will let people know up front, hey, I have an explicit bias around this X thing. So that's leading to my advice here. Okay. So opinion. All right. So how can I lose body fat? So if I'm going to give you my opinion, I'm going to say, well, if you want to lose body fat, you got to be in a calorie deficit. Easiest way to do that is, wherever you're eating right now, just go ahead and eat a little bit less and, probably bring the carbs down somewhat and just make sure you're working out a bunch. Like that's probably what's going to be the best. So that would be just like an opinion that I would have if somebody says like, hey, how can I lose body fat? Now to switch modes, that was even uncomfortable just leaving it at that, because in my head, I'm already thinking, what is this person about to go do? And how is this going to shake out the next time that they reach out or the next time that I see them? So this is, if you've ever reached out to me with a question about my opinion or thoughts on something, 9.8 times out of 10, I've probably asked you for a little bit more information, or I've given you generally, here's what I would say. It's really helpful if you tell me about X, Y, and Z, because then I can get way more specific for you. Can you do that? Okay. So then if I'm giving advice, when someone says, how can I lose body fat? And keeping in mind that advice is pretty well-meaning, but it's not always aligned, then I would respond with something like, well, what I've found is that the thing that's really helped me drop a lot of body fat without specifically like having to track calories, because, I'm all about macro counting, but I've also found that some people have developed like a disordered relationship with macro counting, but also like, I don't have a problem with it. I would actually tell you, first, make sure you're getting in 10,000 steps. I wouldn't do anything super drastic. I'd say lift weights about 4 times per week. I don't really think you need to do a whole lot of cardio. I've noticed that, we see each other coming and going at the gym, and you mentioned that you're always on the go. Like as soon as you get home from the gym, you've got to like get the kids ready. And then, you're taking one kid to daycare, your husband's dropping the other kid off at school. And then you mentioned like you guys have a pretty busy schedule as far as after work and whatnot. So I totally get where you're coming from. So I would actually say, like, let's like keep it super simple. You just maybe need to bring those calories down a bit. Like I really practice portion control here. So why don't you start off with get in 3 meals a day, make sure you prioritize protein, try to minimize on the snacking, make sure you're getting in 100 ounces or more water, get in 10,000 steps. And I'd say stick with that for, probably about 6 weeks. And I think you should be fine. Okay. So that's from an advice standpoint, nothing in there super detrimental. However, if you've tuned into any episodes where I've shared my particular like journey and different things that I've done, a lot of that is things that I've done myself. So nothing like insanely crazy for a long period of time, because I'm more about like for a time, it was more about like slow and steady fat loss and different things like that. You'll also notice that I took into account a bit about what I think that person's life is like. Notice that I didn't ask questions of the individual. I just said, hey, I see you coming and going, and I hear you talking about your crazy schedule all the time. So I'm giving advice, and it's from the context of not just my point of view, it's also what I have observed the other person, but I didn't really take time to get into a whole lot of like back and forth. Now, somebody comes to me and they ask, how can I lose body fat? And they are seeking counsel. And I framed it that way. I would start off with, well, help me understand what your daily habits look like right now. And what I mean by your daily habits is talk to me about what an average weekday and what an average weekend look like when it comes to your eating habits. So give me each of those. Then talk to me a bit about over the past 3 weeks, what have workouts looked like for you? About how many times are you lifting and how many times you doing cardio? And about how long are those workouts when you do those? Help me understand, this is all off the dome here, help me understand what sleep looks like. Talk to me a bit about what it looks like for you when you are about an hour before bed. And then when you get up in the morning, what does that first hour of your day look like? All right, cool. And talk to me about what you're looking at as far as when you say losing body fat. what does that actually mean? Like, talk to me about how you plan to gauge that. So are we talking weighing in, photos? Is there something specifically that you're planning to wear? Oftentimes in these conversations, what I'll find is that somebody has a particular event that's coming up. And when I say event, I'm not even talking something like a wedding or anything along like those lines. It typically will be, well, we're going to be at the lake house, coming up 4th of July. And at the time this episode's coming out, it's late June, so not quite that close. But it'll be something like, yeah, we're, in a couple of months, we're going to be at a lake house for the summer, or we've got this particular travel that's coming up, or we're taking this particular vacation. And I just know I want to feel comfortable in my swimsuit. I know that there's these particular shorts. I just tried on like hard pants for the first time in a couple of months because I have to actually return to the workplace after working from home, and they didn't fit well. So those sorts of things. So what you'll see immediately there is I didn't really offer any specific answers, because in order to actually give counsel, and underneath counsel is a reasonable, effective answer, then there's some information that I'm going to need to know in order to do that. So it's slow, it's detailed, and it's typically the most useful. So that's my best impression right now of what it would look like to give opinion, to give advice, and to give counsel. All right. So I will go ahead and get this episode closed out. So what I want to leave you with here is just the next time that you are finding yourself searching for answers when it comes to fitness, nutrition, and anything in between, I want you to ask yourself, am I looking for an opinion? Am I looking for advice? Or am I ready to seek counsel? Because at the end of the day, my strong belief is that the quality of your question and the willingness to actually dig deeper is going to determine the quality of the results that you get and the sustainability of whatever progress that you make. So just keep that in mind. Certainly don't want to end the episode without, again, saying thank you for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. If you do have questions, comments, concerns, if you're seeking an opinion, advice, or counsel this is the best call to action ever, in the world of fitness, then feel free to reach out to me. My information is in the show note. I am working on something that went out to my email list. By the way, if you're not on my email list, you should be on my email list. You get a free workout every week, which is like hopefully some pretty good value. So far, the feedback on those has actually been pretty solid. So I'm pretty stoked about that. But in my email list, I put out a little bit of a feeler that I got a little bit of a response to so far, to see if anyone is interested. If when I put this particular community together, probably the week after July 4th, most likely. So if you are interested in being a part of a free, and when I say free, I mean free, there's not something where like you'll go to join in the community and it's like, well, you can only see one page, and then if you want to add on, it's this. Overall, just a community of people who are on their fitness journey, on their nutrition journey, on their self-development journey. You just want to be in a community of like-minded people that understand that this is a forever thing, like building and maintaining habits is a forever thing. Then I want to put a community like that together. I'm not really looking for a whole lot of people, to be quite honest with you. I'm just hoping to start with, quite honestly, about 20 people. And so far, I've had a little bit of a response, nowhere near 20. But if you are interested in something like that, just shoot me a DM or an email. Again, information will be in the show notes and you can let me know. All right. So with that, take care. Thank you again so much for listening to the Help Me Understand podcast, and I'll talk to you next time.